Okay, so let's do a little part writing with first inversion triads. And a few rules here to follow. This is on page 121, 120 in your textbook, as you can see here. And first inversion triads are actually a little bit easier to part write because they're inverted, and we because of the organization of the intervals, we do tend to avoid a little bit more some of the errors that might come about with root position part writing. So notice in root position part writing, we were really specific about how we should part write based on the type of root motion 4th, 5th, root motion 3rd, 6th, root motion 2nd, 7th. We still want to keep those things in mind, right? What are the common tones we can keep? We want to keep things mostly stepwise, and then in particular with root motion of a second, even in first inversion, we want to be going in contrary motion to the bass. But here, with doubling, really, we can double anything, as number 1 says, that results in the best voice leading, right? And so we can double the root, we can double the 3rd, we can double the 5th. Now here's the big exception to that rule. We never ever want to double tendency tones. And so it is never good to double the leading tone. So we want to be very careful when we're looking at our 5 chords and our 7 diminished triads, because the leading tone is the chordal 3rd here, and the leading tone is the root here. So we don't want to double those notes ever. And this is why it's important to circle it, to write in a different pen, whatever helps you remember that. So bottom line, with first inversion triads, it's a little bit more open. We can double the root, the 3rd, or the 5th, just as long as none of those notes are a tendency tone, or in this case, a leading tone. It makes things a little bit easier to go about part writing, right? We don't have to remember as much. Now, I will say that you still have to look out for some of those part writing errors, parallel fifths, parallel octaves. I saw a few of you were running into some spacing issues. Doubling the root is still the best thing to do when you're in root position, but when you're in first inversion, you can look for other possibilities. They're going to lead to more common tones and more stepwise motion between our harmonies. So here's some examples of inner voice doubles soprano, inner voice doubles bass, soprano and bass doubled, inner voice is doubled, and so these are just some different possibilities for sonorities in our chords. So those are inner voices are doubling soprano, right? That could be an option. And this is not voice leading, it's just telling you the options for how you might part write this. Inner voice doubles bass, so we can hear what that sounds like. There's our doubling. There's our doubling. The inner voice doubling soprano is actually, for me, it's a nice clear sound, whereas when the inner voice doubles the bass, it's a little bit muddy, less clear. Soprano and bass doubled, right? A little bit more of a closed sound, and that will be the case. And then inner voice is doubled here. And this sound is going to tend to be a little bit more separated on D, because when our inner voices are doubled, they're either going to have to be on top of each other or an octave apart. I really like the sound of the inner voice doubling the soprano, but you can use any and all of these, right? And you can see what's more common moving towards that inner voice double soprano, because I think it results in the best possible sound. So here's some examples of some more. This has some part writing in it, some errors, in it. You can see here that we have some parallel octaves going on between our alto and bass line, E moving to FF, and so we don't want to do that. And the reason for this is we have a doubled leading tone. The leading tone in F major is E natural, right? And so you can see we have that here and that here, and we don't want to double our leading tone. Here's an example of where we have a double leading tone, but one of them is frustrated down while the other is resolved up. I would say still don't do this because the leading tone has a very strong sound to it, right? It's still not a great voicing. Let's look at the last one. This is C. It's much better. It gives us that leading tone, but it doesn't overpower the chord. So for me, this is the best possibility. We don't want to ever double that leading tone. If you just use that as a rule, then you won't run into any errors. And then they talk about some problems with inverting triads in three-part textures, just because we have to omit chords sometimes. They talk a little bit about bass soprano counterpoint, and I think this is really important. This is why we use inverted triads to have a better interaction between our bass and soprano. And you can read a little bit about this, how bass and soprano can go in parallel motion or contrary motion. We want a nice variety as we're going through. I'll let you do a little bit more investigation in that, but for right now, I want to jump over to some part writing examples so you can have some samples for when you have to go and do your homework. So I want to do a couple that are major and a couple that are minor. And you can see here, this is C on page 129. So if you want to pause and grab this and do it with me real quick, that's fine. So here we go. Let's go ahead and just do the first one. We'll voice lead right up to a 5 chord, and notice we have arpeggiation in the bass. So this is B flat major. Again, I would say leave space here, right? So if you're thinking about where to write your tenor line, and you write it down here, that's certainly a possibility, but it doesn't leave you a lot of space. You're going to have to go up. And so you're going to have to go in some sort of similar parallel motion. You might start by doing this first, right? Leaving a good amount of space for your tenor line to move, that Pong game, right? Leaving a good amount of space so it doesn't have to shift upward. We don't face any overlap issues. But we could find that doesn't work, and so we have to do something different. So again, the nice thing about a first inversion triad, and again, this just says 6, but the implication is that we're carrying over that same harmony there. And the nice thing about first inversion triads is that we can really double whatever leads to the best voice leading. And so we can actually just carry these notes over, and that way our root will actually stay doubled, but it doesn't really matter, right? We could be doubling the third or whatever the case could be here. And we're able to keep 2 common tones. That's the sound here. And notice that the inner voice is doubling the soprano, which is a nice sound, I think. Okay. Good, so no issues there. Notice we can keep those common tones. So with inversions, especially moving from the same chord, we're moving from a 1 chord to a 1 chord in first inversion. See if you can keep mostly common tones. That will provide for the best voice leading, and it'll draw our attention to that bass soprano counterpoint. Okay, so what can we keep? What do we need to get rid of? Well, here we can keep this common tone here, and then don't forget your leading tone, which will be right here. And I can just step down. So the resulting part writing or voice leading sounds like this. And the tenor line. So I think that works quite nicely. Let's jump down and do something in a minor key. I think most of these minor examples, they've actually provided the leading tone for you. So let's jump down and do number 5 here. Okay, so we're in F sharp minor. So again, you want to look at the space you have for your alto and your tenor line, and you want to kind of figure out, you want to look ahead and see what you need to allow for as moving forward. I would say here, you want to allow a little bit more space for that alto line. So I'm going to start by voicing this like that, since my bass is generally headed downward. Let's see what that gives us here. Now, the nice thing here is that I can just step right up here. And remember, this is first inversion, so I can double anything except we don't want to double the leading tone. Don't double the leading tone. Don't do it. Okay, so what can we do here? Well, you can see our leading tone is down here, and they've already written it in. The key of F sharp, we have to raise scale degree 7, so now that it's E sharp, now it's E sharp. And the beautiful thing here is we can double the chordal fifth, and that's fine because we're in first inversion. Yes? Now what about here? What are we going to do? Well, we can move right back to our F natural, and we can say, not to our F natural. We got to move up to A natural, and now we have this really nice ascending tenor line, and we can go ahead and keep our alto line. Poor altos, but there's our tenor line. All right, and that's actually a really nice sound there. We want to go through and make sure we haven't caused any errors here, and we can look at all of this, and I'm pretty sure our only fifth or our only issue would be right here, and our other issue would be here between G sharp and G sharp. But notice we've gone inward, G sharp to A and G sharp to F natural, so we don't have any issues or errors there. Okay, and finally, let's go to a 4 chord, and you can see this is root motion of a 4th, 5th. So we should be able to keep a common tone, and we did that F natural. And I would say voice out here to this note, and then up to the D. And in root position, we do want to double our root as we did in this chord here. And so we have some nice contrary motion to the bass with a common tone. This is technique number 1, if you remember that. So here we go. I think it works quite nicely. Our alto line, and here's our tenor line. Kind of nice counterpoint with the bass there. Let's do one more. And gosh, let's go down and do number 11. This is another minor key. I figure we could focus on our minors. B minor here, 1/6 chord. And again, look at the space you have here to work with. Look at the space you have here to work with and decide how you want to voice based on that. I am going to say, let's leave ourselves a lot of space and write a D up there and here. And again, we're in first inversion, so I can double that chordal third. If I was in root position, I'd want to double the root or B. But I'm going to leave myself enough space to part right, to move wherever I want to move here. That leaves me plenty of space to do that. And again, I'm in first inversion, so I don't have to double. Okay, so 2 diminished 6 would be C sharp, E, and G. So again, we're in first inversion here. Now, what can we do? Well, I kind of think we should be, this is root motion of a second, and so I think we should be going in contrary motion to the bass, if at all possible. And so that's the way I would probably part write this example. Oops, sorry, wrong chord. Notice I'm missing a particular note. What note am I missing? I'm missing my G, yes? Now, it's contrary motion to the bass, so I need that G. Can I write it right here? Yes, it's possible. Now, I do have some fifths that are moving together, or excuse me, some fourths that are moving together. Is that okay? Yes, parallel fourths are okay, and in this case, it's a perfect fourth moving to a diminished fourth, so I'm A-okay. We can check some of our other octaves. Here's our octave, and that moves into a sixth. And we have a fifth going on. I don't actually see a fifth. It would only be the fourth, so we have no issues there. Let's keep moving on. Here's our leading tone here. And that's already sharped, so we don't have to do anything with that. And can we keep anything over? We can keep the C natural, and then we can just move that F sharp down. And again, we're being in contrary motion to the bass. We've kept one common tone. It works quite nicely. Now we have to be very careful of how we approach the leading tone in minor keys. If we're coming from lay, that's an augmented second, right? We're not in this case, we're coming from re, and so it works quite nicely. Now, what's the rule for 5 going to 6? Remember, we always want to double the chordal third in our 6 chord in a deceptive progression, right? Okay, so how can we do that? We need to resolve our leading tone up, and our chordal third is going to be doubled right there. Okay, and because we have the chordal third right there, we need to jump this down to D natural, and that's the best resolution. So here we've doubled our chordal third. Don't forget that. There you have it, alto line. This is so, le, so, me. And then our tenor line starts on me, re, do. Some nice lines, I think. All right, good luck on these assignments in first inversion. Let me know if you have any questions, and we'll see you in class.